Hi everyone, welcome to Launchpad, an initiative by Newton School, where you can learn industry ready technology for free. So this is introduction to React.js course. And if you have not signed up for Newton School, go ahead and sign up and subscribe to this course. So in the past two lectures, we understood what React is and how to use React, and what are the features of React, what is component in React, and why we make components and why we try to make them as small and as independent as possible. And we also learned about state and props. What are state, what are props, and how they affect our component. Okay. So in this lecture, you'll understand how to create multiple page React application. So previously, yesterday in our last lecture, we learned how to create an app which I only have one component and no other page, only just one page to be done. And today we'll learn how to make multiple page app, and we also learn about something called as component lifecycle, and we also learn about refs. So let's just get started. So basically starting with creating a multiple page app. We're going to start with that. Okay. So if you remember, this was the last code in which we have an app component which have a contact component and an about component. But generally, on a website, you will see that these are links which you can click and then go to those pages. But currently, we cannot do that because these are just components, not a routing, not a link or a URL that our React application understands. To make it a multi-page application, we have to do is go to command line, and we have to install a package called npm. We will do is npm-r, and we will install a package called React Router. Now, what this package is, this package gives us all the necessary things that we require to create a multi-page app. So by default, React does not allow us to do that. By default, React is a single page application. So whenever you have single page application, like it only have one page, no pages. But we generally need more pages. So we need to have something called as React Router, which allows us to do that. Okay. So where we type this command, this will install React Router DOM in our node modules, and it will also update our package JSON with this. So whenever you give, like if you share your code and to another person, he can just directly install whatever package you want by running an npm installed. You don't have to type every package name. He can just she can run just whatever configuration you set up directly. You don't have to set up again and again. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to remove everything from here just for now, and we're going to make some links so that we can just move just go to those pages using our URL. Contact us and href and /about. So this is our our app component currently. Okay. So what now we have to make a route also. Okay. So we have installed this package called React Router DOM. We'll import certain things from React Router DOM. Okay. So import from React Router DOM. Now we will import something called as browser router. Then we will import something called as a route. And for now that will work. Okay. So what browser router is? Browser router is another component. It's React component only, which allows us to make an application like. So basically, what it does is it will allow us to use multiple routes in that. Like if you want one route for context at a slash contact route and slash about route. So it's a parent component which will hold all our routes, which understand how routing works in a React context, and which will allow us to do the basic stuff that you want to do with routing. So we use browser router. It's just basically a component only, same as app. And inside the browser router, what we use is a route component. Okay, so and that just it is the same component that we imported from React router ROM. What route component does, it actually creates the route. So if you do not have any route inside this, you still cannot navigate. Only browser router will not do anything. So like if you just have this thing, it will not do anything because there is no route defined. We have to define what route is and what component we have to load on that route. Okay. So what we can do is we're going to define route, and then path. Path is the URL path that we have to define. So let's say we want to have on a contact page. So we here in the href we used slash contact. So we have to write this path only because this is the path that it is going to look for. Okay. Now we have to tell which component we have to render. Okay. So we have to render the contact component. Okay. This is the component we have. So let's just render the contact component. Now it did have two props. Just remove this one because now the count is nowhere there. So we can just remove it. Just make this clear. Okay. We will pass the URL. Okay, so URL is going to be, let's just suppose we will pass http Newton School. Okay. So this is our component render here. Now we just close it because it is also a self-closing component. Okay. Now what we can do is we can also create another route. Path is equals to slash account. Out. Just looking at the about code. This was our about code that we wrote yesterday. Okay, so just about code here, and we just can close it. Okay, so this will define a route for now. Okay, the one more thing here, we don't want any other routes to match, like when you have multiple routes. Okay, and you so like just a minute. When you have multiple routes that are with same name, let's just say about, and then you have something called as user. Okay, so if you have these two routes, slash about slash user, okay, or just make it upper one. So and just import it from here only. Okay. And let's just look at these routes. Why we use switch here? The reason for using switch here is we only want one route to be matched, not every route. Like if we match this route in the URL, then we don't want to the component control to go here. It just only go here, render this component, and it is done. Okay. So that's why we use switch. Switch is basically like if you remember switch case in programming. And each case we have, and each case will have a break. It's same like that. And these are the cases. Each route component that you put here is a case, and these route component will only match one. Okay. Now there is another one more specific, but let's just first look how this works. Okay. So we'll go and we'll start our component. And so in the meantime, we just going to discuss one more thing. Here, just look at here. We used A tags. Okay. So what you will see is since we're using a default HTML tag, what this will do is it will refresh the page. So there is other one more way in React to do this routing. So whenever you want to make a link to some other page in your project or in your React application, you can use that if you don't want the whole page to refresh. If you just only want the component to be rendered, you can use that thing. Okay. So since it is done, you can just go about this. Okay, so this is our application. If we click on contact us, okay, yeah, just a second. So just remove this. Okay, just for now, we'll just do this way. Let's just make sure this works fine. Okay. So basically, what the error is saying is it is not able to render this app component. We have to look why it is not rendering. Just a minute. Okay, so this is okay, just finding it dealing with this thing. Just this browser router here. And the slash router to the contact. This what is this? Okay, so this. Okay, so basically to resolve this error, we have to make the component here right now. Like so, just make the component here. Take us there, which will return. It about okay. So this will be our component which will be rendered when we go to the route slash. Okay. Now we want to render these components this way. Now this contact components need to be rendered in this place. Okay, and the same way we can just do this. Okay, so this gives us our components. We'll save them, and let's just see the result. Yep. So when we go to but not the render. Okay, yep. So the problem, if you look at here, is when we click at contact, it will go to contact, but it in URL it will show contact, but it will only render the slash component. And the reason for that is when you have this way of defining a route where you did not define that should it match the exact path or should it match any path that is possible. Okay, so what happens, remember, with switch is first path that matches will be rendered. Okay, so if you look at this place here, the route that would be coming here would be slash contact. Okay, now slash contact matches to two routes. One is slash contact and one is slash. But since we have used switch, we will only match slash. So to make the route more specific, so what we do is we make an exact, we pass an prop which is called exact. It's a boolean prop, so if you pass it, it will like just make it true, or you can just make it like you can just pass it like this, so it makes true. So basically we will do pass exact if you want to map the exact route. So it basically generally what you will do is you will use exact keyword because you only want that specific part to be matched, no other path with the same maybe prefix or with the same, like just suppose if here instead of about that was contact slash contact one. Okay, so you don't want this slash contact to match with this slash contact one. So that's why we always keep an exact keyword in that. If you want multiple routes to match to same route path value, so you will use this. You will remove this exact keyword. Okay, so let's just save this thing and let's look at the browser. Now we can see this thing is rendered correctly. Now if we can just do this slash, now just try to look at the page. It will try to refresh. Okay, So when we click on about, everything is refreshed. So there is so instead of just this component being loaded into the DOM structure, everything is the window is refreshed. Okay, so to deal with this kind of thing, what we can do is, instead of using an a tag here, we can just import a component called link from React Router DOM, and here instead of that, we can use link, and there has to be a two actually. Now there is called two props. Two props means two means we have to pass put in the path where we want it to go. So let's just make contact to be a link, and then a to be a and then about to be a, and let's just see the difference. What difference it gives? Okay. Okay. And this is we are on about page. We go to this root page, then we click contact, and you can see the page did not refresh. If we go back and we look at it again, when we click on contact, the page does not refresh. No refreshes happens. If you look at this thing, the refresh button, it will not turn to cross button. Okay, this directly loads the component in your whatever the component is directly in the DOM structure. It does not refreshes the whole DOM structure. Okay, so this is the React way to do it. But if for some reason you want to have an A tag, generally people use A tag for something called as search engine optimization. And so if you want to use that, you can use it. But just the downside is like when you click about, you can see the page refreshes. So these are two things you need to remember. Then if you want the page to refresh, you can always use a tag, or whichever way you have done in HTML. Okay, like you could also do it with on click, and then window.href you could also done. Okay, but if you don't want the page to refresh, if you want to look at like it's a same seamless experience, no refreshing happened, then you can use link tag, which is present in React Router. Okay, so that was basics about how this component, how the we can make multi-page React application. So what we do is we create a browser router, and inside that browser router we would have a switch statement, and the reason for switch is to uh, to only match one single route and just return from that. Okay, do not match multiple routes. Now then we have each switch needs to be needs to be like every route needs to have a route component. So whenever you want to make a new route, you will make a route component and pass in the props like path and what component to render. And if you want that path to be specifically the same, so like the path string that you're going to get needs to be the same as the path you provided to this component. You need to pass exact prop. Okay, exact prop is the boolean, so you can either pass it like just like exact. So whenever you pass this exact, it is by default means it is true. If you do not pass it, it is by default means false. And if you pass like that, it also will. Okay, so this was about routing and React, and how we can make a multi-page application. And we'll move on to something called as component lifecycle. Okay, now if you remember, we discussed about components yesterday. Okay, so component is like basic building blocks. Okay, so just think about component as a seed, or as like a baby. Okay, so it has some life cycle, like when it is started, when it is closed, when it is in view, when it is not in view, when the props are updated, or when there is something update in a state. Okay, so what life cycle is? Lifecycle methods are basically lifecycle methods are are the functions which allow us to get in between these life cycle. So like suppose you want, when your component is mounted, you want to fetch data from somewhere. Like just suppose you want to fetch data from Google Maps or somewhere else, okay? Or like Instagram or somewhere you want to fetch data. So what you will do is on when the component is mounted or when the component started, you want to include your API call there. So there are some life cycle methods that will allow us you to do that. Okay, so let's look into that basically. So there are four phases of a React component. Okay, there is an initialization phase, there is a mounting phase, there is an update phase, and then an unmounting phase. Initialization phase is basically when your component is called, so its constructor is called basically. That's the initialization phase. So whatever is in the constructor is called, if it's a class component. Okay. Mounting phase is mounting phase is when your constructor gets called, something basically mounting phase is this, that your component is going to be in the view, like it is going to be displayed on the browser. Okay, that is mounting phase. When your component is about to get displayed and getting displayed on the browser is the mounting phase. Update phase is whenever something change happened in the props or in the state, then the update function is called. Okay, this is the update phase. And unmounting phase is when your component is out of the view. So like suppose you had a button component, and when you click next to something button you had, okay, and when you clicked on the next, then it is not shown on the screen. So that component is unmounted, that component is removed from the real DOM. So that, and then the unmounting phase of the component will start. Okay, so basically in a gist, we will have this thing. Sorry. This is the basic phases and what methods are called and how they're called. Okay, so as told, like in initialization, we will have a constructor called. Inside the constructor, we could put states and props that we need by default. If you don't put it, and if you directly put it like we did yesterday without using constructor, if you remember. So this was without using constructor. This also comes inside the initialization phase only. And you can put it in like constructor form. So if you want to do that, you can do that also. If you want to do it like this, you can just simply do it like this. Okay. So that was initialization phase. Initialization phase does not have many things to be done. It just make your state populate with default value and just initializes your props. So whatever the component props you are receiving, it just sets those up. Okay. Now mounting and updating phase is the most important phases of a component. So when your component gets mounted, mounting means in a React terms, when we say that component is mounted means component is displayed on the screen. Okay, so whenever the component is going to be displayed on the screen, then it is okay. So that two times the component will be displayed on the screen, but only one time it's going to be mounted. Mounting is only done when the first time the component comes inside the DOM. Okay, it will not be mounted again and again on every re-render. Okay, it will only be mounted when first time when it comes inside the real DOM. Just give me a second. When the so how the flow chart is when the component is about to be mounted, we call component will mount. And now this is a deprecated function now. This is no longer supported like in the React, and they have deprecated it. But still, just for knowledge purposes, what it was is after your constructor and everything that was like written before the constructor or like in the as a class variables is done. What will happen is component will mount function is called. So these are just normal functions. Component will mount function will be called, and whatever the code inside that function. So like if you wanted some things to be done before even the component is first time rendered, like when the constructor is done, you want something to happen. Okay, like maybe an API call or maybe something. Then this component mount lifecycle method was used. But currently in the versions like in 16 version React 16, it was deprecated. So you should not use this until unless very necessary, because it is a now a deprecated method. So a best for as a best practice, you should not use this. Okay. So now the next step inside in the mounting phase is the render. So if you remember the render function, we use the render function. That's why you need to have a render function always, because it is run whenever your component is uh, first time is going to be displayed on the browser. Okay, so this is the render function. So we talked about render function yesterday. So but this is the next phase. So basically, with the initialization state, initialized state, so the default state. That's why I said you should have a default state, even if it does not mean anything. It should actually have some kind of default state, so that at least first time your component can get rendered. Okay. Now after that, we will have component ReadMount. Now we will talk more about these in details. Like component ReadMount, what happens is after render happens, generally what you will have is you will have some kind of API call that will get you the data that is required in your component. Okay. So what will you do? You will put in these API calls inside this function, component ReadMount, so that it at least your function get rendered. Then after the API call happens, like first time it get rendered, otherwise it will be stuck and the user will not see anything. At least it has to render one time. And then in component ReadMount, you will show some, you will write the condition in a way that it will make an update on the state, and that update will trigger the component re-render again, and the component re-render again. So the render function will again then be called. That so just suppose you have some API call here. You call the API. This is our API. Okay. You call this API, but and this API is asynchronous, because generally what we want is APIs to be asynchronous, because it can take a hell lot of time to just load the data from the API. Okay. So what you do, you change some state using set state function such that your component get re-rendered, and it tells the user that your component is currently loading. Okay. So your then this re-render will occur again, and your component will show the correct the state which it needs to show. Okay. So this was about mounting phase. Now we will go to the update phase. Now what happens in update phase? Now the two things happens in an update phase. Okay. What two things are? Either the props get updated, or either the state get updated. Okay. So let's just talk about props first. So if you remember, props are the properties that are passed by from the parent to the child. Okay. So basically, what will happen is we will have a component will receive props, same as the one that is mounting one. We will have component will receive props. Okay. So the component will receive props the same. Component will receive props. Will do is before any props are passed to your component, this function get called. Okay. So let's just suppose if we go to the code, and we had okay, just for now we will remove these router and all those things. So um, okay. Okay, so think about this as a component. Okay, this was our previous component which we were showing a button, and whenever the click happened, we updated the count variable from here, and we also passed this count variable in the count. Okay. Now what will happen is in the contact component, whenever you do is component will receive props. Now, what this receive props was having is it will have a prop parameter called next props, and this next prop will have the props that are coming to, that are currently coming to the component. So whenever you update whenever you click on the button, the count gets updated. Then the count prop that we are passing to the contact component will also get changed. So it will you can get this prop, that the coming prop from here. So if you do is console log next prop here, props, and then choose. And if you look into the browser and just let me open the console. If we look at here, you can see we were passing two props. Only the one that was changed was this. This was the constant. If we look at this, the count 3. Okay, so every time the new props that are passed to your component, they can be accessed. They can be accessed in the component will receive props. Okay, but as mentioned, this component will receive props is now deprecated, so you should not use it. Okay, until unless it's something your use case required, you should not use it. Okay. Now this is the function is should component update. Now what should component update does is it checks the current props that you had, like the previous props that you had, and the current props that are coming to your component. It will check the difference between them and see if they're changed or not. Okay, so this is basically most of the time you will not even worry about this because React does it. React does this for us. But if in some scenario you want to do some custom update, then you will override this component, should component update. And what it will have is it just make it like true or false. So if should component update returns true, which will be the case if the previous props and the current props are changed. Okay, so then it will say like true, and component will update will be triggered. But if it is not say, then component will not update nothing. If this thing is false, this will never be executed. Your component will not re-render, your component update will not happen, anything will not happen. Okay, so that was component deducted. It basically you in most general scenario will not need it. But if you are doing something very custom and if you're going very inside, if you need to go deep inside the React component lifecycle, so to modify that, then you will use it. Okay, and it's very advanced thing. So you should like for beginners, it will not be needed. Now component will update. Component will update is same. Component will update is same with like component will receive props. Um, what will happen is when should component update says yes, the component should re-render. So some extra calculations and some what part of the component needs to be re-rendered and what should not re-render is you can modify this in component will update. But as said, component will update is also deprecated, so we have some deprecated methods in the lifecycle, but they are not useful now because how now the new React version is structured. So as a best practice, you should not use it. But if, as said, like if you want some custom thing, then you can use it by all means. Now, after this, and the render function is get called. So what happens is your props have changed. Since your props have changed, and then if you have used props somewhere else, okay. So your component needs to be re-rendered, okay. So if we look at it this way, just a second. Contact.js. Let's just revert this also back. Okay, so this will give you a better understanding how what happens in component prop update. So if we look into this, just refreshing this. Okay, so if we look into this thing, whenever we click one, what will happen is component will receive props on lifecycle method gets called. Then should component update check whether the props are different or not. Since the props are different, because here it is 2 and it will also be passed 2 here, components are different. So should component update will say update it please. Then after when component update is true, then render function is called, because we are using render function is called, and what it does is it says we have to like change the value of this, because basically this value has changed. So component re-renders means render function get every time render function get calls, inside things are rendered again. Okay, so what happens is our count value will get changed, and we'll see the new count. Okay, now there is one thing also that happen after render is component did update. What this says is after rendering um, and everything happened due to props update, what this says is if the component updated, like if the component updated, like if render happened, then after render component did update method is called. And what generally you do with the component did update method is, we will have component did update method, we'll have a some this type of this uh, previous props and previous state. Now what these are, previous props and previous state. Previous props are like, now when the props change, the the props that we had, the current props we had, they, from the this dot props, they change, because the render function has shown us, like, if you look into this, this our props have changed. Okay, but for some reason we want that the our what were the previous props, what were the props that we were having previously before this update. Maybe there was search result, search, you build a search page. Okay, and you wanted to know like what the user searched beforehand, so that you can do some analytics or whatever you wanted to do. So what after the props changed, component did update gets called, and it has two things: previous props, the props that were previously, so like before this function, before the this prop change, what were the props previously, and the previous state was if the state was changed also, what was the previous state before this. Okay, so basically generally component did update is basically used whenever you want to like have some data that you need to either save, or you need to do some processing on that afterwards, so that you can use it later on by the means of some other side effects in the React component. So that was our component did update. Okay, now as mentioned, there are two things that can change: props and a state. So same with state. If you change the state with this dot set state function, so if we go to the code and we look at this, so this set state function will change the state also. Okay, so what it does is this will change our state of count variable and increase it from the current count variable by 1. Okay, so this is also an update in the component, because now the component needs to reflect this value here also, and it needs to pass to its child that now the current count value is this. So the same life cycle happens. The component should component update function get called. It checks whether the state update that happened was any different than previous one. If it is not different than previous one, then it will not trigger any re-render or anything after this. Anything after this will not trigger if it state was same as the previous state. Okay. Now component will update. This one is deprecated, but it works same as this one. This same functions. It is deprecated now, so you should not use it. And then the render happens. So if we look at the code, whenever we do the set state, we get this render function get called again, because we need to update the wherever we have used this state variable. Okay, so we update this state variable value in the render function, and then finally we will call component did update. Now component did update, as mentioned, have two parameters: previous state and previous prop. So whenever props change, you can have previous props also. And suppose if state changed, like you did a set state, then you can have these previous state also. So just make sure that whatever you wanted to do with the previous state and the current state, to check and call an API or do some third party service call, whatever you wanted to do. So you can do that. Okay, so that was our update cycle. And then there is comes the unmounting cycle. Unmounting cycle is basically simple. What it is, it just calls this component will unmount, basically, and does not take any parameter, does not have any parameters. So basically, what this does is, anything that you added in the component which you will not need after this component is done, you remove it. And now you don't have to remove the state and props because they're automatically done by the React. But sometimes what you would do is, when you are using component did mount, you add a listener. So let's just say window dot add event listener for like Keydown. Just suppose you added an event for Keydown for whatever reason, okay, and you handle it with some function like with this dot handle Keydown. So let's just make it handle Keydown, and this is an arrow function, and then we just log it. Okay, so what will happen is, when this component get rendered, your Keydown listener will get activated. So we have used component ReadMount. If you remember, this is the function called gets called after the first render. Okay, on the mounting, in the mounting phase. So it will add an event listener in the which is listen to Keydown, and this will handle the Keydown by just using whatever is in this function. Okay, now it's always a good practice to remove these event handlers, because it might affect some other component which also had the same event handler. So what we'll do is just window dot remove event listener. That was Keydown, and this dot handle Keydown. Okay. So what it will do, it will just remove this listener from this component. Okay. It's always a good practice to remove any listener, anything that is that you created that is only to this component, that is only required in this component, like some event listeners or some gestures or something like those. Okay, so you will learn when you have to do this, when you going to do some complex project to remove these listeners and all those things. Okay, so basically that was our so if you look into the browser, just refreshing this, and just say if you look into the console again, if I do key presses, this key press log will keep on continuing to do that. And if we have to remove this, so if we go to some other component, if the component gets unmounted, then we have to remove this, and that's what it does. Basically, it will remove our event listener from this. So component will unmount is very simple. It just removes whatever you wanted to not be present after this component is done. Okay. So basically, this is so initialization phase. In initialization phase, we prepare component with constructor and initial state. Okay. Mounting phase, as you said, after preparing with the state props and initial state and all those things, this what will we will have render and component did mount to be called so that we can just render. We at least first can render initially, and then after component did mount, we can, if we want to re-render, we can use set state or to just trigger another render. Okay. So component will mount. This is deprecated. Just before the React component is about to mount to the DOM, it will only be triggered when the React component is about to be mounted. Okay, and it is only executed once in a life cycle. So as I told you, it is mounting is only done once in a life cycle of a component. Okay, so that, and this is just generally used for initializing states or props. So that's why, since we can also use constructor, that's why this function is now deprecated. That's why. Okay. Now render function. This is a basic function that renders everything on our component, and it is a pure method. So in a JavaScript, what a pure method is whenever you give the same input, it will always going to produce the same output. Okay. So it's just a pure method. And then comes the component mount. This is the most important function in the mounting cycle. So this is called after first render of the DOM, first render of your component, and only executed once in a life cycle. And in this method, we can also access the DOM, because since render happened previous to this, so render was for, last step, then component did not. So something is rendered in our component now. So we can access that component rendered DOM. Okay. So let's just suppose you have a div, so then you can use document.get element by ID to get that div. Okay. Now, what people will do here, or a general practice is to add event listener here, or just basically call APIs and other stuff that are need to be asynchronous. Okay. Now, update can happen by two ways: sending new props or updating the state. So if you send new props, then we'll receive props. Should component update, component will update, render, and component did update. Okay. So we have discussed these. Basically, component will receive props is just this gets executed when the props have changed. It is not yet executed on the first render. Okay. And sometimes we have a state that depends on props. Sometimes we do that so that just to like some variable we need to store that is coming from the parent. So we store in the state, because props are we cannot change the props, so we have to move them to state. So this so in this we can actually take those new props and then use set state also. Okay. And so this way you can get your state synced with the new props. Now, should component update, it tells React whether you want to update or not, whether you should update or not. And this method is used to do preparation for upcoming render. So as mentioned, like it will be executed before the render. After the, so whenever props or state gets updated, this will get called after should component update. And if you want to do some low level stuff that that requires you to change how the component need to be rendered after this update, you will use component will update. And then there is a render, and then there is component did update. Okay. So same goes with updating the state, and then it's unmounted. This is component mount. So basically, this is last method in lifecycle and executed just before component get removed from the DOM. So in this, we do all the type of cleanups like removing event listener, or if your user is logged out and you want for some reason to logged in, and if you want for some reason to log out whenever this component get re-rendered, then you will just put that code also in here. Okay. Now, one last thing remaining to discuss for this lecture is refs. Now, what refs are? Refs are, just suppose this is our div element. Okay. So now this div element, for some reason you need to access this div element. Okay. So you can do what basically we would do in JavaScript is document dot get element by ID and assign this thing as an ID. Let's just say this was RT or a div. You can just make it a div and then we just assign this an ID. We can access it. So if we just console log it, we can access, we can see that we can access it. So just refresh this page and we click it. So since we did it whenever we want whenever it gets clicked, we wanted this, we want to access this div. Okay. So we console log in here. Okay. So whenever this get clicked, we will get a console here, which has all the properties that this div have. Okay. Now this is well and good, but this is not the React way. Okay, so in React you have some specific ways you can do that, and you do these things. So to use this feature like this, that's why we use ref. So ref is a reference. So if you say if you and just look at the variables or just if you know see, then if you mark some variable with ampersand a, let's just say a, then you get the reference, not the value. Okay, so that's what the ref is. So ref is basically short form for reference. So let's just define a ref here. Our first ref. Now to define a ref, what you have to do is call a function called react.createRef. Okay, so now this will basically define your ref and assign this to our first ref. Okay, now but this is just a basic creation of the ref. It does not contain any element. Now if we want a element to be there, what we do is we wherever we had put ID. So previously we were using ID. Now what we will use is ref prop. Every component will have a ref prop in React. So you could put a ref prop in everywhere, anywhere you wherever you want. And now if you're making custom component, then you have to put in your props. You will have to handle those refs. If it is pre-built component, then it will always be handled by React. Okay. So we will put as ref and just put the variable that is there. So these are our first ref. Now, if we want, if we access this our first ref, this dot our first ref, you will see the same output. Just into this and clean this out, refresh the page, and then if you look at the console, we get the same output. Now you notice this this is an object and it has a current. So whatever the element you want to access is inside the current key in this object. So the value of the current holds your element. Okay. So this was basics about ref. So why we need to use ref is if we want to access the element which as we used to do with get element by ID, we can use ref. Okay. So that was basically it for this lecture. So what we learned is how to make a React app with multiple components, and we also learned how to how component what are the different life cycle of a component, what are the different phases of a component, and we learned about the refs, how to access an element, DOM and DOM variable that we need to use. Okay, so that's it. Thank you very much for your time.